Thank you, Minister. Fianna Fáil strongly supports the legislation before the House today. We had a vote at our Ardèche back in 2012 where our members endorsed equal marriage for same-sex couples. They also voted in favour of equal adoption rights for same-sex couples. As a Republican Party, we believe in equality for all citizens, be they male or female, black or white, gay or straight. It's a core principle of our party, and it's one that was reiterated earlier on this week. And we held our own event to launch a programme of events to commemorate 1916. And I think it's particularly fitting that this legislation is progressing now in the advance of the centenary of the Easter Rising next year. I think we have an opportunity now as a people to genuinely bring through the ideals of our founding fathers in the proclamation and ensure that we do deliver a society that treats all of the children of the nation equally. So for that reason, as I said, we support the referendum. Our Director of Elections, Niall Collins, has already undertaken a national tour organising public meetings around the country. For my own part, I'm knocking on doors 5 times a week in my own area and helping groups doing canvassing training for marriage equality and yes equality and other groups to ensure that there's a ground war in this as well, because I think it's very important that the Irish people get an opportunity to interact with those who are campaigning for a yes vote, to ask us questions and to understand for themselves what the campaign is really about. I think, unfortunately, some of that gets lost, much of it gets lost in the media coverage because of the restrictive rules that we have with respect to the Coughlin judgment and the way that it has been applied since, where you end up with this situation where there's this kind of 50-50 debate on everything, regardless of whether that's actually reflective of where anybody stands on an issue, when all political parties are in favour, when all major children's rights organisations are in favour of it, human rights organisations, trade unions, medical organisations, every type of civil society group is in favour, and yet media debates look like it's a half-and-half issue. And people constantly tell me that makes it really confusing for them, that they come away from watching those programmes with nothing more than a headache, to be honest with you, and no more enlightened about what the debate is actually about. And I think that's a serious issue because, particularly from a public service broadcasting point of view, I think public service broadcasters have a responsibility to enlighten people and to explain what referenda are about and not to leave them in this fog that's caused by just ridiculous, contentious debates that don't help anybody. So I do think a door-to-door campaign is very important. But let's be clear, the question before us in this referendum is incredibly simple. The bill is 2-3 lines long, and that's it, including the title. There's a one-line question, which is whether 2 adults who love each other and are committed to spending the rest of their lives together should be able to get married, be they male and female, female and female, male and male, because love is the same regardless of gender. I think it's precisely because the question is so simple that the no side are deliberately trying to muddy the waters and confuse people, because they know that the Irish people are warm people, we're understanding, we're empathetic, we don't like to see other members of our society suffer for no good reason. And when people are asked a straight question as to whether they think 2 committed adults in love with each other should be able to marry, the response is overwhelmingly yes. I was part of the Constitutional Convention where we discussed this issue. We heard all the arguments on both sides over the course of 2 days, and at the end of that, the citizen members voted overwhelmingly in favour of marriage equality. It was actually a very emotional experience because citizens who came into that process not convinced, who told me on the Saturday morning, I'm not sure about this, I believe in equal rights for people, but I'm just not sure about marriage, I don't get it, I'm not convinced that it's necessary. By Sunday afternoon, when the vote was announced, they were in tears, along with the rest of us, and hugging each other, and it was just such an emotional response because they had listened to lesbian and gay people affected by this, they had seen the human side of it, and seeing the impact that discrimination and denying people the right to marry has on themselves and their families. They had listened to 2 incredibly articulate young people who had been brought up by lesbian parents, and made, any parent would be proud to have these 2 people stand up and reflect their family and their upbringing. And after those 2 young people spoke, a lady beside me turned around to me and said, "Oh my God, how could we justify this? That you have 2 people who've said that clearly they had amazing parents, they had a great upbringing, same home environment as everybody else, and yet our society doesn't treat them the same." And they said that the only unhappiness that they had as kids was being treated differently by our state. when they were clearly brought up in a loving and very supportive environment. So, as I said, I think it's because people overwhelmingly respond positively when the question that's put to them is the one that's actually on the ballot paper, which is just whether two adults should be able to marry, that the No lobby are deliberately trying to confuse and make the referendum about other issues. They'll claim that the referendum is a referendum on adoption, which is completely unrelated, entirely separate issue, one in which I have huge personal interest, as you know, Minister, which has absolutely nothing to do with this referendum. As things stand, gay people can adopt. They can only do, as of today, they can only do so as individuals, which actually the only people that penalises are the children, because when a couple adopts and the only person who has a legal relationship with them is one of their parents, that's damaging for the child because it doesn't give them a legal connection and support with their second parent. But they can adopt, and under the children's legislation, the family law bill that's going through at the minute, by this time next week, all cohabiting couples, people in civil partnerships will be able to adopt. So it's a complete red herring. So regardless of whether people vote yes or no in the referendum, same-sex partners will be able to adopt. And I think it's important to look at the experience that we have from fostering, where for many years gay couples have been fostering very successfully and providing a loving and supporting environment from children from very difficult circumstances, children whose earlier lives were very difficult, and giving them a second chance. But it's also important to point out, when people get obsessed with the adoption issue, that only a handful of children are adopted in Ireland these days. In fact, it's probably not enough, but last year I think there were 112 adoptions, of which almost 100 were by family members, by step-parents or other relatives. So I think it's most disingenuous that certain groups try to portray this referendum as being about issues like adoption. But moreover, the important point is that regardless of whether people vote yes or no, children are being brought up in same-sex families. Many gay people have kids of their own from previous relationships, from a time when they weren't comfortable to come out, and they end up marrying somebody of the opposite sex and going through the torment and the pain of marital breakdown before setting up a second life. They have children, they are acting as parents, and voting no in this referendum just denies those children the protection and the support. So this is not a referendum about notional children that might be created on the 23rd of May. This is a referendum about real families that are there and that deserve support. No child should be discriminated against because of the shape of their family environment. Every child deserves the same support. But moreover, research shows that the most important thing from a child development point of view is that children are brought up in a happy and stable home. It doesn't matter whether that's by a single parent, by step-parents, by a widow, by grandparents, or by two mums or two dads. The most important thing is that a child is cared for and that they're supported. And I think the kind of prejudice now that we're seeing against families headed by same-sex couples is precisely the type of prejudice that was previously visited on single parents, women who were shamed because they left violent situations before we had divorce in this country, and they walked away because it was a safer thing for themselves and for their children. And they were shamed because of an ideology in this country that said you had to stay with your husband no matter what. And their children were discriminated against as a result. And it's precisely the same type of judgmentalism and discrimination that's now being used against same-sex families. It's also the same type of attitude, Minister, that led to adopted people like myself. There are about 60,000, 70,000 of us in Ireland being forcefully separated from our mothers, because my mother and many others got pregnant when they weren't married. And Irish society made a judgment that you were better off being with any married couple than with your own mother. You know, and it's the same people now who talk about mothers and fathers, who were exactly the same people who were arguing for a long time in this country that you were far better off not with your biological mother, with anybody else, because they didn't think that your biological mother was worthy. So those judgments have done untold damage to us as a society. They've done untold damage to families in the past, and they've done untold damage to children. And I think it's time we put all of that prejudice behind us and ensure that all families, whatever their shape, get equal support and equal recognition. I want to deal with one other red herring, which is that of assisted human reproduction. Again, the No campaigners trying to make this a referendum on his human reproduction and whether people should be able to conceive through sperm donation or surrogacy. Of course, they don't like to acknowledge the fact that AHR is mainly used by heterosexual couples. The vast majority of people who use it are heterosexual couples, but it doesn't suit their argument to acknowledge that, or that you don't have to be married to use it. So, of course, this is entirely irrelevant as an issue in a debate on marriage equality. And they ignore the fact that you're addressing those issues. I don't agree with anonymous donation. I don't agree with commercial surrogacy, and I'm glad, Minister, the government is outlawing both of those issues. That's right. So again, that the referendum is not about any of those issues. What it is about simply is about equality. It's about equal respect and equal support. And gay men and women aspire to getting married for the exact same reasons as everybody else. They hope to find someone that they love and want to spend the rest of their lives with. They wish to express that love and commitment in front of their friends and family, and they want to share in the joys and overcome the challenges, it has to be said, of married life. And as a married woman myself, I'm a firm believer in marriage. I believe that it's good not just for couples, but also for families and for a wider society. I think it's very positive that Ireland still has one of the highest marriage rates in the world. Divorce didn't ruin marriage, and neither will opening up marriage to a wider group of people. If my gay friends get married, it won't affect my marriage one bit, or anybody else's, but it will make them happier. And I think it will also send out a very, very positive message to young gay people in particular who are struggling to come to terms with their sexual orientation, who, despite all the progress that has been made, thankfully, in recent years in LGBT equality, many young lesbian and gay teenagers still struggle when they realise that they're gay. They find it difficult to come to terms with it. They worry about being rejected by their families. They're concerned that they won't have the same opportunities in life as their heterosexual siblings. And they fear being lonely and not being able to marry and settle down and grow old with somebody that they care about. And as a result, gay teenagers are much more likely to be depressed and even suicidal than their straight peers. So I think we have an opportunity on the 22nd of May to send them and the rest of our lesbian and gay citizens a strong message of love and solidarity by voting yes.
Thank you very much.